Now it's time to join Hilary Calvert. It's sort of a preview of the week and its news and what's been interesting, and she's sort of her insightful comment upon. Dunedin's an interesting place to be at the best of times. That's where Hilary is resident, and I would imagine she is an isolated outpost of common sense in the Soviet Socialist Republic of Dunedin, but that could just be me. She joins us now. Hilary, how are you this morning, or this afternoon?
Yes, good. And I wanted to reassure you as well, Michael, about your Shiraz.
So
about
the good comparison.
The choice of Shiraz rather than meth.
Yeah.
Because in the ODT today, there was a comment by, it turns out, the Executive Director of the New Zealand Alcohol Beverages Council, so make of that what you will, but she's giving some background into the so-called research that came out of the University of Otago, as if they weren't in enough trouble.
Yeah.
That's all to say about that. But apparently, the two people, Dr. Rose Crossan and Prof. Joe Bowden from the University of Otago, who were co-authors of the rankings research, the Alcohol Council is talking about that, and the research in question apparently refers to two facilitated workshops attended by experts from across medicine, psychology, justice, community services and harm reduction. And they got together and ranked 23 different drugs for their perceived harm. So this is two facilitated workshops, and very subjective. They were asked what the effect on a single person who typically uses that drug and what was considered to be a typical way. I'm not sure what you typically use meth, now that would be. But the research also, apparently, the people who wrote it gave the panellists who did it, the results of the rating exercise was reviewed by the panels before finalised to ensure that they demonstrated face validity. And apparently what that meant was they could tweak the ratings before they were finalised if the group didn't like what they saw. So this is not actually research at all. It's complete hocus-pocus nonsense. And the guy in charge of it, who, under the leadership of, and I can say this is a nutty idea, because he's Professor David Nutt, apparently, and he was fired from his... So it was a nutty idea, this whole thing. He was fired from his role as chairman of the government's advisory council in Britain on the misuse of drugs in Britain after producing a paper which claimed that Class A drug ecstasy was safer than equestrian sports.
Right. Okay.
So just to put your use of Australian Shiraz, and mind you, that's got to be some of the best, as you say, because of their glut at the moment. But that just puts in context the choices most of us are making, and just makes such a nonsense of people who say their research. And so the mainstream media gets up and says, oh, there's been this research saying the opposite. And actually, it isn't research. It's a group of people, including a harm prevention officer, or is it an alcohol prevention officer, one or the other, having a look, making a decision between themselves, and if they don't like it, then tweaking it so it says something else, and then ending up with complete bullshit. I mean, so we really shouldn't...
No. Listen, I read, and that's the problem with academics, not specifically Otago University, but academics in general, is that they always seem to start their research from a fundamental philosophy or particular viewpoint. And it seems that Dr. Rose Crossan, for example, who is the study co-author, and also her co-author, I think, by the name of Bowden, Professor Bowden. I've read some of their background research prior to discussing this with you this morning. And they've been researching in this area for years and have argued for a long time, essentially, that alcohol causes more harm than meth and other illegal drugs. And you don't quite know what their aim of that is. Is their aim to make sure, because it's certainly the aim of the New Zealand Drug Foundation, who support their findings, and to basically legalise illegal drugs in this country? And you'd have to say, yeah, it is. That's where you're heading towards. That's the sort of philosophical underpinning of the research that you're suggesting, yeah?
Yeah. Well, the other thing that this, the Alcohol Council said was that if you'd added sugar into the mix, it would have really come out on.
Yeah.
So alcohol would have been dead for dust compared with if you'd added the effects of sugar into the mix. So why not do that?
But again, I'm struggling. I'm struggling on the I'm struggling on what the aim is. It's sort of one of those things. I think academia disappears down a wormhole. I thought that when I was an undergraduate, which is the reason I didn't want to become an academic. And I went, holy crap, there's a whole lot of people going down wormholes here. Well, it's got worse, not better. But it seems odd to me that somebody's funded this research, probably the New Zealand taxpayer, through the Marsden Fund or something like that, which is the slush fund for stupid scientific surveys and less than scientific surveys, lots of psychology involved in the Marsden Fund. Have you seen that?
It was the Callaghan Institute. And why I'm hopeful that it might have been the Callaghan, or whatever it is, Institute, is that their funding's been reduced. And the person in charge of that says they're really sad that they can't support for next year a whole lot of interesting stuff they wanted done. So I'm just hoping it's some of this sort of bullshit.
Yeah, well, no question about that. Hey, just on that, was there a protest in Dunedin over the weekend, or did you hear of it or know about it, or was it just the same usual suspects? This week it's Palestine, next week it's coal, today it's the fast-track consent bill.
Now Palestine is always there because it's the same people. And I mean, it's interesting to me that basically what we've got with the fast tracking and the oil and gas is that we know that the previous government did fast tracking, and we know that they did fast. You can't end up with new alternatives to oil and coal unless you fast track some things, because you can't do anything big without fast tracking. And the previous lot did it, and this lot will do it. But the basic difference is that they don't like Shane Jones being a person who makes the decision. And Shane Jones is just saying, stick your ban on oil and gas where the sun don't shine, for the purposes of that when the sun don't shine, we're going to need it, really. And so there, it's a pretense of saying it's because it's undemocratic and this and that, and we can get 2,000 people around the country to think they can overturn the democratically elected majority-supported government that we've got, who signalled that they were going to do some of these things. It's just daft. So having a little group thinking that, and they are getting supported by, what does Sean call it? The not historic media, but the legacy media.
Legacy media, yeah.
Yeah, it just seems to me that they're trying to achieve what they couldn't achieve through democratic purposes and ways. And, of course, they're welcome to march up and down the street, saying, like Casablanca had that lovely line in it, saying, round up the usual suspects. And the usual suspects get rounded up and marched up and down the street. And sometimes they have a consistent lot of messages and sometimes not. But there's no consistency about not having fast-track legislation. All of them will do it, whoever they are. And as you were saying earlier, there's checks and balances in the middle of there. At the end of the day, I think there's two differences: that a panel doesn't get to decide, effectively no one outside the ministers, and the last government abrogated its political responsibility by sometimes letting other people decide and calling it evidence-based or something. In this case, at the end of the day, the government, who is properly responsible for the decisions, will decide and call it.